Hey, this is Miss Becky, and we're going to look at art card activity number 2. And I just thought maybe I would try a video to see if that would help you to understand how to do your project even better. So I'm using the white cardstock that is just a large 5x8 index card. I like using this because it's cheaper than art paper, but it's much thicker than just using regular printing paper from your printer thing. And so it's cheaper, but it's thicker, so if you use it for some paint mediums and stuff, it doesn't buckle as easily. And lastly, because it is a set size, it's kind of small, so you don't feel overwhelmed in doing these little projects. All right, so we are moving into chapter 3 and 4. Chapter 3 is all about the elements of art, which is line, shape, form as in not the material for a particular project, but form as in how it looks 3D mass, texture, color, value, and space are the elements of art. So we want to do some of these things in our work. And that's why we're doing this particular project. Also, we're going to be looking in chapter 4 at the principles of art, which are things like balance. How do we get something to look like it's balanced? You ever seen a picture on the wall that looks like it needs to be straightened, and then once you straighten it, you realize it was straight already? It's because the picture itself was not well balanced. All right, so there can be emphasis, there can be unity and variety. So there's, some things that kind of are different from one another, with some things that are similar with one another. All right, so those kinds of things, proportion and scale. So all of those kinds of things is what we're looking at in this particular work, and so it's just basically a line work with a lot of color. All right, so I just wanted to show you that. All right, so for our project, you can use markers. I like these Crayolas because they have a taper point. A taper point means that, see, it has a little rounded tapering type point, which means you can get some nice thin lines as well as thick lines. I usually keep a piece of scrap paper around so I can doodle. You can put the thing right up on its point, and if you put it on its point, it'll make nice thin lines, but if you let it go over on its side, it'll make much thicker lines. All right, so it's hard to show you on this one because this is kind of flexible, not too hard, but we're going to work on that. And these are water-based type markers, so you need to keep that in mind, because if you're going to put any watercolor, or if you're going to use this over black line drawings, you would want to use a permanent marker for your black line. So I like the Sharpies, or some of these other brands that are like Bic marking, or the Sharpie. That's what I kind of like. However, today when I was pulled out my Sharpie, some of them were not too inky. They're kind of old. So this one is just a cheapie. I mean, you guys, you don't have to spend money at an art store and buy the best brand of everything to do these little projects. Just go down to the Walmart, go down to the Dollar Tree, the 5 and under store, whatever is close and handy to you, and look to see what you got. This one is a permanent magic marker. All right, so you probably want to pick up 1 or 2 of those, just because when you put down your basic lines, if you're going to come back in and color with marker, you don't want bleeding. So that's a good thing. Okay, the other thing that you can, some of you may have some of these things around the house. I'm sorry, I guess I'm not normal because I always had all these things around the house because my kids enjoyed coloring and doing all kinds of projects and stuff themselves. So this is also Crayola markers. These are the fine line ones. So usually what I did is always pick up my supplies right at the beginning of the school year, that week right after school starts. Usually Walmart would reduce these to like 97 cents. I noticed this year they weren't reducing things, And I asked why, and they said, oh, we've decided that whatever doesn't sell within 2 weeks or so, we're just going to pack up and donate. They didn't say to whom, but they're going to donate it. So I'm assuming that'll go to, I don't know, schools in districts that don't get as much money or whatever. These are nice to have on hand too. There's some highlighters because sometimes you want a brighter color somewhere that's brighter than just your Crayolas. Crayolas are pretty clean colors. That's the one thing about buying something cheaper. A lot of times it has a, it doesn't have as clean and bright or pretty a color. It doesn't dry as pretty. It might look okay when you put it on wet, but as it dries, it starts darkening. It doesn't look as pretty and fresh. So you can decide. Remember, it is not your artwork that's being graded here. So before you start hollering, I'm not an artist and I shouldn't be graded this way. So before that happens, just remember you're not being graded on your artistic ability. Okay, so you should not worry. Okay, the other thing that I've done is I've cut out a few things from a magazine. I'm going to show you that toward the end as we create one of these, just so you can kind of see some things. And I've created one, but I'm reluctant to show you right off because, again, you'll probably say, oh my gosh, she's going to expect us to do that. And I'm not. So, all right, so I'm gonna show you how to get started on this particular project. So I'm going to turn you around so you don't have to look at me. Hello. All right, so here's my lovely little easel. This is how I take pictures and do instruction for my kids when we first started COVID. You know, and my art council that I teach with said, oh, we should continue having after school art program for the kids. Why don't you just record some stuff? And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm not the best at recording things, but I have learned a few things. So maybe this will come across pretty well. I just put my paper up on a clipboard, and it's on an easel to make it easy for you to see and have it held, so it's easier for me to work on this way. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is just think about lines. And as we talk about lines in class, we're going to talk about how you can have straight lines, you can have thin lines, you can have thick lines. See, that one's already drying up. I'm going to do this one. There we go. All right, so you can have thin lines, you can have thicker lines, you can have broken lines, you can have curved lines, you can make zigzag type lines. So there's all kinds of lines that you can create. And it's really good to have a little extra piece of paper around to just experiment on before you put it on your card, so you kind of figure out what you want to do before you actually get too far along. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start, and this one I think is a blue marker or purple marker, which I would have preferred a black marker, but that's okay. All right, so what you want to do is you want to come from one side of the paper to the other side. We're going to divide up the surface some. All right, so you might just decide on, okay, maybe I'll make a nice line. I'm going to pull it up on its point and then hopefully pull it back down again so it kind of gets wider. Yeah, that's pretty good. So it goes from one side to the other side. Just a way to kind of cut up the paper a little bit. I might make another line that comes down. Maybe it'll do a loop-de-loo right here, or maybe even a reverse loop-de-loo and come across the page this way. All right, so I'm just really trying to just cut up the surface a little bit and, you know, and try to, so I have some spaces to fill in. That's the main thing. Line is one of the most critical elements of art because most every art, including jewelry making and sculpture and other things, has to have a line. So it's very basic to almost any artistic endeavor. All right, so let's try some and you could change color if you want to. The main thing is you want to stay with kind of a permanent marker for these basic lines, and I'm going to show you why in just a minute. All right, so I'm going to bring a line across. Maybe I'm going to make it broken. and then continue on. All right, so if you break a line like this with this, then it looks like it's kind of going behind. So you can start making the case for something that is like a space. Okay, and my easel's already fallen back, so I'm going to pull it up a little. All right, so I'm going to do, maybe I need to divide this space right here a little bit more. Maybe I'll just come straight down and make a thin line. Oh, this is good. See where that one has the top? This is the bottom. I can make a diagonal line. It's going to cut across right there. All right, so I'm just looking at ways to kind of divide up my space. And this looks pretty decent. So, I mean, I got this nice bigger space here. So I could break that up a little if I wanted to, but you do not have to. All right, so I lost the lid to my marker. All right, so now I'm going to pull out some color. So color is one of the elements of art that we're going to be looking at. And the other thing I could do is actually make a shape if I wanted to, or I could do it in a color if I wanted to. So maybe that's a good thing to think about for this little space right here. Maybe I should make a shape. So I could think about whether I want to do a free-form shape. A free-form shape would be something like a mud puddle. Could be a leaf if you wanted to, because leaves are free-form shapes. It could be, you know, a hand or anything like that. You could lay a shell down and trace around the shell. It would be a free-form shape. All right. Geometric shapes, of course, are the things you're most familiar with. Things like circles and squares and triangles. So if you got kids who are in school, if they're very advanced, they're taking geometry and they're looking at various types of shapes. If they're young children like kindergartners and so forth, they're learning their shapes, right? So these are geometric, these are freeform. So I could think about this space right here and possibly make, I don't know, let me just put in a shape. I'll just put in a circle. And guess what? It doesn't have to be a perfect circle. Isn't that a nice thing to know? All right, so because you can see now, if you want a perfect circle, you can lay a lid down and trace around it or something of that nature. I think I might echo that shape right up here in this space right here and make a smaller circle. All right, so now I've kind of brought that over someplace else. See, there's no science to this. It's just, you know, looking at, it's kind of like doodle art. We're looking at art, we're looking at the surface and deciding what we want to put where. Okay, so now we can start thinking about filling things up. And so you can use all kinds of lines to fill with. You can use different types of color to fill with. All right, so since this is a red dot in this space right here, I think I'll use green because green is a complement to red. And when I go to write about this on my exam for next week, for week number 2, we could earn some kudo points by saying that I'm using complementary colors because I'm using red and green or purple and yellow or the dreaded gator blue and orange. All right, so I can take and make some lines. I'm just going to fill in my space with a few lines. I'm going to come around my red circle here so I don't lose that. And this is how I'm going to fill in this space. Now, if you're going to use lines or shapes, oops, that one kind of went haywire. That's okay. You want to go from one edge to the other edge so it looks like it fills that space up. You don't want to just quickly put it in and it doesn't go all the way over to a line. All right, you can come back over and go the other way. And if you have a set of markers where you have more than one color of green, or even if you want to use a contrasting color, you could come back over with a contrasting color. Okay, so I've kind of got that space filled. And I could come back and think about either making that red line a little thicker, so it shows up more, or I can fill that spot in with just red color or anything like that. Okay, so this is how basically I'm suggesting you kind of fill in your composition, is by just creating all kinds of lines, or actually literally coloring in a space. All right, so if I had my green highlighter, that would probably be really good. But I think this space right in here, since we got this cool green next to this warm red, I think I'll take my orange highlighter. I'm gonna pull it over on its side because it's got a chisel point. And see, this is where, having used a permanent marker, it will not bleed. So if you use the marker out of the Crayola pack, it's a watercolor marker, and when you draw the other lighter colored marker right over it, it's going to bleed into your color. All right, so you notice I'm not like a kindergartner here coloring like this, and I've got a chisel type point of marker, so it's easy to lay it over flat on its side and highlight. This is a highlighter, so think about when you're highlighting the old textbook instead of the e-textbook, how you can actually fill in. And I could think about other spaces I might want to fill in this space with orange as well. Now, what do you think the complement for orange is? Yeah, you got it. It's that nasty gator color blue. So I'm going to fill this in. Okay. All right, so I can just fill it in with color, and I like to streak like that. It's an old graphic art way of applying color with marker instead of just coloring and having an uneven tone. All right, so we're starting to fill in this side. Okay, so now I'm going to start thinking about some of these other spaces here and what I can use. So I'm going to go back to my markers and look. Oh yeah, I got to use some blue because we got some orange here. I want to try and create something that looks like complementary colors. Now you have to go with those gator colors. Okay, if you're a gator fan, I don't want to hear about it later. You know, I just happen to be, yeah, never mind. All right, so you can use lines in all kinds of ways. So you can take and put your marker down in a spot and just basically come around like you're going to make a circle get ever bigger. And when you do that, you're creating kind of a spiral line. All right, so anytime you repeat the same type of line or the same type of shape in a space, it's going to create what we thought of as texture. It is a drawn texture. So I'm going to take and do that right here. I'm just going to make some small spirals and fill in my space. And if I get them in there kind of close together, let them bump together, it's going to fill up that space really nicely. I just kind of look for the white spaces. I don't like white. So there we go. It just doesn't look finished to me sometimes if it's got a lot of white paper to it. And see, like right there, I put in some small ones. All right, so now we got that space kind of filled in. So you can just continue to do that kind of thing all over your page. All right, so red is the complement to that green right there. Maybe I'll take and make some wide lines that kind of echo that curve there. And I'm going to stop for this bubble. I'm going to do something different right there. I'm going to make some wide lines. And by creating a line after a line after a line like this, it actually creates a sense of movement. Anytime you have a nice curved line, it kind of gives you that sense of movement. All right, so all of these things are things you can talk about when you do your little discussion thing online. I'm going to fill in some thin lines in between. There they go. So that fills in with some color, but it's not completely solid color. It gives you a little bit of design at the same time. All right, so now I'm thinking, what do we need in this bubble right here? And what about this space below? Should we make the same type of line here that we make down below? That's a good question. All right, so let me think, what color do I want to use? All right, so you can use a color that is in the same family, like orange is in the same family as red, because red and yellow make orange. If you continue to fill in a section of your page, like if we did orange and yellows and oranges over here, this would become what we call an analogous kind of color scheme, a very warm color scheme. So you might think about doing that. You might make one side of your page warm colors like oranges, yellows, and reds, and the other side of your paper keep it reds, blues, and greens, and purples, things that are cooler in nature, cooler and kind of cooler. All right. So I mean that's one thing to think about. All right. So let's see. All right, so I'm thinking maybe I'll just put in some little circles here in orange. I'm going to fill in this bubble right here with a little bit of, and there again, when you repeat a shape or you repeat any kind of shape or any kind of line in a space, it creates a feeling of a texture, okay? It's called implied texture because it's not real texture. If I were to take a knife and cut the page so you could actually feel texture, that would be actual texture. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Maybe I'll make this other one kind of hairy. All right, so you can make one hairy just by adding little tiny lines, like you're adding grass lines. And every now and then, if you let one kind of go off the edge, it'll look like, whoa, it is hairy because it's kind of coming off the edge. That's implied texture. All right, we're here with this red. I think I'm going to leave this one blank and white, but I think I'm going to take this one and create a zigzag line across it. And your zigzags don't have to be even. Stay inside, thank you. And I can do one side, I can do with thin lines, so I could come back on my point and put in some thin lines. I'm going to follow the same lines. Oops, hello. Yeah, so this is driving my bifocal glasses really crazy here. So you can see, whoop, hello. Okay, so it's just kind of lines that kind of repeat over and over again and kind of gives you that feeling that it's filled in. And I could still leave that white area white, just leave it white, and that way we can talk about space and how it creates a feeling of space. Okay, I'm gonna come back and make my red line just a little bit heavier because I like for that to show up some. And I'm not worried about if I make a little bumple here and there because it's just for fun, right? Okay. Yep. Okay. All right, so I would probably continue on and create, fill in spaces along the way. You can use some crayon if you would prefer, colored pencils. I happen to have a pack of colored pencils here that these are watercolor type pencils. I picked these up at Michael's. They're the cheap brand. The Artist Loft is kind of cheap, so the coloration is not as pretty, and these happen to be watercolor pencils, so I can use them like a colored pencil if I want to, or I can actually put a clean brush of water on top and it'll break the color up and make it look like it's watercolor. So you can do some of your sections with colored pencil if you like, or you can do some of your sections with crayon if you want to, whatever. Now next week, the week after this one, we're going to talk about the difference in mediums. So if you stay with all markers in this particular one, that would be fine, because we're going to switch it up next week and use different types of mediums so you can kind of tell the difference. All right, so that just kind of gives you an idea of how to break it up and then just start coming in and filling in some of your surfaces with color. I kind of like this this space right in here. I think I might just bring my blue, whoop, hello, my blue down. I'm going to stripe it in a little bit, and then I'm going to break it up like it was broken there. Hello, go right out to the edge. Here we go. I'll make another one. This one's not, kind of bumped into that one, so it made it look even thicker. There we go. So it's hard for me to work this way because I'm kind of working like, all right, and I can continue to make more broken lines. If you wanted to, you could actually get these smaller and smaller. Until I get down to where I'm going to break into just little dots. You can even dot a surface if you want to. I'm going to try to hold it in a line. Like I say, it's hard for me to see this from the angle I'm working at, so try to hold it in a line. And then after I've held it in a line, I'm going to let it go kind of wild and free and whoopee. All right, so if you use these Crayola markers with this tapered point, if you just set it down, it makes a perfect dot. So if you get to go in too fast, sometimes it looks a little chaotic and whatever, but if you kind of maintain your excitement so that you don't go too fast, you can just literally set it down on the paper and it's going to make a dot for you. Okay, so now I have this section kind of filled in. It's kind of like it goes from being fairly organized to being kind of erratic, which is fine. It's kind of interesting, it was just a way to fill in that space. All right, so you can think about all kinds of ways that you might want to do that. All right, now take a deep breath. This is one that I created, and I'm going to show it to you, and please don't gasp because this is not exactly what I'm expecting you to do. I'm expecting you to just keep on filling things in. Experiment with some different types of lines so you can fill in these areas. Make sure you go all the way out to the edges of your lines. Just color some of them in, that's fine. We're going to talk about the different types of color schemes and textures and other things like that when we have class this week, because we're looking at the elements of art. So now I'm going to show you one that I did that's finished. Hello, there we go. See, I heard that gasp. Oh my gosh. Okay, it's fine, it's fine. Okay, so I just started with a curly curl line. I love curved lines, and this is exactly where I started. I started by cutting up my surface with a line, decided that it should be thin up here and thick right in here, and then thin back out again. Lots of variety there. Okay, then I divided up my space by coming in with this broken line that I brought over here, kind of like a little question mark or a hook. I'm just dividing up the space. I'm not really thinking, oh, it's got to be this way or got to be that way. I did decide I wanted to put in some type of geometric type of figure. So stars and circles or squares or triangles, trapezoids, whatever you're into, pentagons. If you put a space in like that, it is a geometric type of shape. All right, so I'm thinking about shapes, I'm thinking about textures. I've started filling in with these lines, and to begin with, I was going to keep it neutral colors so we could see blacks and browns and grays, but I didn't get enough, there's not enough variety for me. I really like color, and so some people love to work in a more neutral type tone. If you want to do that, that's fine. The only difference is when you begin to talk about it in your exam next week, you would have to you would have to state that this is a neutral color scheme, and so you can't talk about complementary colors or analogous colors or colors that are a warm color scheme or cool color scheme and that kind of thing. So I decided I should go ahead and add some color here. All right, so what I did is I ended up filling in my space just like I was showing you, different types of lines. If you put line after line after line, it gives you a sense of movement, a sense of movement. I can't think of the right word. And so I started with these gray lines and filling in. And so I've used thick ones and thin ones. If you're using that taper point, you can pull it up on its top so it makes a thin line and then pull it over. So use a scrappy piece of paper and just try that, where you pull it over and then pick it back up and pull it around. And if you practice just a little bit, I'm telling you, like 3 minutes, you probably can do it pretty easily on your own. Okay, here's my little spiral lines. I took and divided up a space here with a zigzag line. I like zigzag lines that are not like perfect little up and down zigzag lines. I like something that's a little different than that. All right, so I always make mine different heights and different angles and so forth. And then I decided, well, I'll fill in with my spirals. And then I decided, okay, maybe I should color in part of this so we get this kind of modified triangle shape in some of them, okay? So, I mean, it's decisions that you make just like an artist would make, and that's the point of doing these little projects. All right, so I ended up with this nice white space right down here, and I thought, okay, what can I do right there? And I decided, oh, it would be nice to maybe have eyes looking out through this menagerie of lines and colors and shapes and textures. And so that's why I drew the eye first. And then I thought, well, there's still so much space here, some lines for here to indicate here. And then I ended up just kind of putting a face in. So now I have this nice organic shape, a free form shape, because humans and animals and leaves and all those kinds of things are free form shapes. And I have a nice geometric shape, so I can talk about those things in my work. Okay, so I know some of you would be kind of, some of you would be adventurous enough to maybe try some type of figure in your work, or, you know, and some of you are like, no way I'm going to do that. So here's a way to handle this in this particular work. Go in and look in some little magazines, before you start, and find some little figures. So see, this is a little figure of a little gal. She was leaning back on a sofa or bed or somewhere, watching her phone. So think about, you could actually put that figure in. You could even put her in like this. So, you know, mine is kind of busy. So you may want to plan this ahead of time and think about, in your own work, would I want to use a little figure? Oh, she could be like right there. So sometimes you get something really nice drawn in, and then when you paste something on top, you're like, well, I lost that. I don't know if that's worth that or not. All right, so that would give you some form like that. Don't get too overly too big about something, but you could come back in with something like this as a geometric type shape, a non-organic item. So, I mean, but just look for something kind of small. Here was one that was kind of nice. Whoop, I've already lost them. Oh, hello. So this was a little rattan sort of chair. All right, so these are the things you would put in last after you filled up your surface. Whoop, hello, sorry. And it's funny, a funky little table type surface there. Whoop, hello. All right, so you can kind of glue some of these things in, just a few, a small one here and there. Look for something kind of small. And that way, when you get ready to discuss it, you can talk about non-organic items and organic items, free-formed items, and that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's up to you if you want to put something in there like that. If you've left a space kind of like this one, doesn't that kind of remind you of some mountains or something? And if you wanted to, you could come back in like with blue colored pencil or something and do your swirly lines, or make even almost like a sunset sort of thing here. And then when you're talking about the elements of art, you could talk about space, because this makes it feel like there is a sky and there is a ground level, and it creates that sense of space. You could also do that here where you see this broken line coming across in this line, because this line, the broken line doesn't just cross it, it literally stops for it and starts on the other side. By doing that, you're saying that broken line is underneath this line that is complete. So you can talk about space there as well. All right, so I'm hoping that this is kind of clarifying your little assignment for this particular week. This is art card activity number 2. You'll find the directions for it on the D2L. I'm hoping to put this video. We'll see how good my technical skills are. Put my video on there as well, so when you look at the instructions for art card number 2, you'll see this video as well to reference, to kind of give you some idea of how to do it. And remember, you're not being graded on the quality of your artwork. However, don't be the sly fox who thinks, oh, I'll just scribble a few things on there and be done. All right, so my project, this particular project, took me about 30 minutes, maybe 35, but not more than that. So I'm expecting you to put in about 30 minutes worth of effort here. Okay? All right, so think about that. Oh, here's another thing. When I first highlighted this, I used a really bright highlighter, and I wanted to make sure it was emphasized and really bright, so I came back over it, and that really darkened it instead of leaving it to pop. If you leave something like that to pop, you can talk about emphasis. Emphasis or focal point, and that is one of the principles of art. How do you think this particular work is balanced? Would it be symmetrical? No, because if you drew a line down through the middle, one side doesn't look the same as the other. Would it be radial? No, it's not designed in a circular shape. Although it's got circles here and there, it's not designed radiating out in a circular pattern. So it's not that. It is an asymmetrical type of balance. How did we get this to balance? By creating this larger swirl here, a smaller swirl here. That kind of creates a sense of balance. We've made this curved line over here with this weight of this particular line there. That kind of helps keep it balanced. And then the star puts that heavier weight on this side to kind of counterbalance this other weight. All right, so all of these are the types of things that I would hope that you could speak about when you do your writing. There we go. We're at the museum. We're looking at art. All right, so think about those kinds of things as you're doing. I hope you'll enjoy doing the activities. I mean, my whole thought was, the reason I came up with these activities was because, first of all, in our objectives, it says you will make art. Okay, so I thought, well, let's make it fun. Let's put something in that would correlate with what we're talking about in our chapters. So I would suggest you do your design your art card activity this week prior to going online and doing your quiz. Make sure you've done your project first. And just think about the kinds of things that you would want to talk about as you're doing this. Line, patterns, color, different types of color, balance, space. You know, what kinds of things are you going to talk about? Because you will be writing on your exam. And I hope your writings will get stronger and stronger, and that's going to make your writing for the end much stronger, as well as the project that you have due at the very end as well. So I think that just about wraps it up. I'll see you in class this week, week number 2. Bye.